Hi, this is Tara Reade. I'm your host.
Now.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host. This is Tara Reade, and I have a very special guest. This is a special edition of the Politics of Survival. I have award-winning Canadian journalist Eva Bartlett live from Ukraine. Eva, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Good morning, Tara.
Yes, it's early. You got up early for me. Thank you. It's later.
I get up early anyway, but yeah, you're welcome.
All right. So everyone stateside and in Europe is worried about you because apparently the Ukrainian military decided there's a website that puts you on a kill list, and it's horrendous. And there's other journalists on this list. And I was wondering if you could just start out talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a list that was formed many years ago, I think in 2014, I believe it was. And it's effectively a hit list for any dissenting voice. And there are thousands of names on it. And I would stress and emphasize that, we should also very much be concerned for Ukrainians themselves, because in the democracy that is Ukraine, if you are a dissenting voice of any sort, or not even a dissenting voice, but if you are somebody who's shown any sort of support towards the Donbass republics, even as innocuous as a taxi driver taking a pensioner from the Donetsk People's Republic to wherever they go in Ukraine to get their pension, you can end up on this list. So wow. You will have it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's crazy enough that a journalist, because journalists should not be targeted for doing their profession.
No, journalism is not a crime.
Yeah. But there have been Ukrainian opposition members put on the list, and and civilians as well. And so on this list, they'll put your name, they'll put any detail they can get, including like your home address, your telephone number, etc. And people have died after being put on the list. So, we could say it's a coincidence, but I highly doubt that.
You were actually, it's not been in the mainstream news. And in fact, as you know, you saw a video clip that I did because I was very concerned about it. And then you saw other people, trying to individually just lift up the fact that this was happening. But the only media I saw in Indy, who's with us, who's producing and engineering right now from INN. Indy, could you put up the picture of that, the slide? Is RT International was the only media company that I've seen, at least, that has dealt with the kill list. Indy, do you have that?
So what I can say to that is, well, Tara, you are aware of the NBC, we'll put in parentheses, journalist, who smeared not only myself, but it was 12 people in her smear, including Patrick Lancaster, who's lived in the Donetsk People's Republic for since, I don't know, I think he's lived here since 2014, maybe before, maybe slightly after, but point being, he's lived here a number of years. And he's done some incredibly courageous reporting from on the ground, putting himself at risk. And, she had the audacity to basically say his reports are contrived, that the people that he's shown, unfortunately, in this type of area, not in this type of reporting, you will be showing dead bodies,
Right.
She had the audacity to say effectively that the reports he showed, including dead bodies, were staged. So it's disgusting.
That is
from her office, her comfortable office, wherever she's based, and him sweating and putting his life at risk, reporting, to show the truth about what these people here, where I am now, have been enduring for 8 years. 8 years of killing by Ukraine.
14,000 Russian nationals murdered, by neo-Nazi brigades. Indy, do you have that? I'm sorry. Do you have that?
Okay.
Thank you. The article. Could you? Okay, go ahead. No, I can't see the NBC article. We can't see. It doesn't show us on our side. I can't see. Sorry.
I might have it screenshotted on my phone.
Yeah, there we go. Here it is. Russian propaganda efforts. That's okay. Russian propaganda efforts aided by pro-Kremlin content creators research finds. So you were talking about this NBC hit, and I made the point publicly that no Western media covered that a journalist that holds an American passport and a Canadian passport is on a Ukrainian kill list, and not NBC, not CBS, not CNN, not any of the Great Britain stations like BBC have talked about this, but rather a couple of days ago, NBC did a hit piece with you in it, featuring you and other fine investigative journalists, simply because, you know, they're not doing the State Department, you know, talking points, which is apparently, if you're not doing NATO talking points or the US talking points, it's like you don't exist, or worse, they attack you.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
true?
Yeah, this is something I've experienced since, I would say, late 2016 for my reporting from Syria, because again, what I was reporting from Syria did not jive with the official narrative, which was frankly bullshit, pardon my language, but it was propaganda coming from the West, and it did not match with reality, which I was seeing on the ground. When Aleppo was liberated in late 2016, Western media said Aleppo fell, and I had just left Aleppo and I was in New York City giving some lectures, and I saw on TV and I was like, are you crazy? Like, Aleppo has been liberated from Al-Qaeda. This is supposed to be America's enemy. And you're saying Aleppo fell because now women like you and me can walk in the streets freely? I mean, it's ridiculous. But I just want to make one more point, Tara, is just prior to the NBC smear, CBC, which is Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, so Canadian state-funded media, we have to make that point because, you know, they always make the point about Russian state-funded media, reached out to me and tried to get me to come onto their program, which, you know, I don't give them the time of day because they don't deserve my time, frankly. I'm happy to talk with any honest voice, no matter how large or small their audience. But these unscrupulous prostitutes don't deserve our time. I would extend that to anybody, including yourself. But CBC reached out to me, and they here's the interesting thing. They reached out to me to say, we want to do an interview with you about the fact that you participated in a tribunal on Ukraine's war crimes. The interesting thing is, the only way that they could have known about that is if they had seen the kill list entry on me, which specified that. Now, the entry on me was actually created a few years ago, but they've updated it since. And they updated it to include that I participated as a journalist in this tribunal in Moscow in like a month or so ago, in April, I think. And I just gave my observations of what I'd seen from here in the Donbass. And so the only way the CBC hack could have known was that he saw the entry on the kill list, because I did not publicize this on my social media. I didn't have a link at the time or whatever. So he, in his email to me, did not express concern about the fact that I, a Canadian, a fellow colleague, was on a kill list. Instead, he wanted me to he wanted to entrap me into talking about my participation in this tribunal. And you know how that would have gone. He would have cherry-picked a soundbite, said this Russian regime apologist, blah, 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 but not at all talked about the fact that I could be wiped out because I'm on this kill list.
Or disappeared. Indeed, do you have that you have that tweet? I believe I pulled it. If you could put it up for us on the screen. CBC.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So for my audience, this is what she was talking about. So instead of actually discussing the fact that a journalist is on a kill list, they want to do a hit piece on her, and entrap her. I mean, it's just, I mean, it's so frustrating. And that we have so many, I won't even call them journalists. They're stenographers for the empire, right? Because they're not doing the work. You're doing the work. You know, Max Blumenthal, the Gray Zone, is doing the work. And then you've got Wyatt Reade doing the work. And all of them get labeled as Russian state affiliated media when they're actually on the ground and trying to get the truth. It's frustrating. So,
but, you know, I have to say that I don't know what the CBC has produced. Their timeline was kind of vague. They didn't give me a deadline like Brandy of NBC. But as for Brandy and NBC, as you know well, like her attempt to smear flopped massively, as they always do, actually. I would say that my colleagues would agree that whenever, and yourself, you've experienced the smears, I would say that whenever the smears happen, you find more support than ever, because people like, inquisitive minds. Basically, I feel like those who go along with the smear have already made up their mind, and they're either extremely brainwashed or they're part of the problem. But then there are other people that maybe just never came across the person that issued the subject, and they're like, oh, well, that's interesting, I'll look at that, and oh, well, actually this person that you're smearing makes a lot of sense. So thanks NBC for the publicity. It backfired massively. And the other point I would make about that smear is that, and I did so on Twitter, is that this is 2022, and Brandy seems to still think that the White Helmets are a valiant rescue operation, when we all know that they're a propaganda construct massively funded by the West that works exclusively with terrorists in Syria. So she, outed herself as either supremely stupid or supremely complicit, or both, by endorsing the White Helmets narrative in 2022.
Well, I like the way, and I'm not sure, was it you or someone else I saw that highlighted that her only past writing experience was about luxury bathrooms or something? Maybe that was on your clean.
That was, I did say that, but that was actually about a prior smear. But it's
prior smear.
But it's right. Essentially it's the same kind of personality, because to my knowledge, I mean, I think you've looked at Brandy's writings, and I did, and I didn't see any about Ukraine or Donbass. I didn't see any prior knowledge of this area. So why that the bathroom journalist I mentioned is relevant is that some years ago, The Guardian got this woman, Olivia Solon, who's based in California, I think, to write a piece, a story, as she called it, on Vanessa Beeley, my colleague and good friend, and myself. And she sent us also an email full of incriminating questions, also asking how we qualify as journalists, etc. And when I looked into her, she didn't know anything about Syria. Her experience was writing about fashion and shoes and toilets in LA, so that's why I was like, this is the quality they're dredging up. But that's what they do. They bring these people. It doesn't matter if they have any sort of knowledge about the subject matter. And then these people send these incredibly offensive emails at us, demanding our attention and participation. But the thing is, they don't realize, we're not that dumb, and we're not that naive. We've been through this before, and like, they don't, as I said before, deserve our time. So I think, like, I know a lot of people would say, like, we'll just go on, maybe they'll give you time, but no, they won't. They'll never give you a fair shot. Their aim is not to be a news source. Their aim is to manipulate your thoughts and to manipulate your perception of a particular event into their very narrow, preconceived idea, which is, of course, aligned with the warmongers. It's not like this individual journalist's thoughts. And that's another difference. Like, you are an independent journalist, I'm an independent journalist. And when I go to a place like here, I have ideas about things I want to write about, but I don't have a script written, because I need to talk to people, and then I need to see what they want to tell me. And then that's when I start deciding how to write things. But if they deign to come here, they'd already have the script written, and they'd just be looking. They
have to go within those parameters. Absolutely. And not outside, right? Because of what they're paid to do, and it wouldn't get past their editors even if they tried, probably.
No, Tara, if I may, I'm sorry, but if I may,
go ahead.
In 2017, I was giving a lecture in Montreal, and 2 Canadian press students came to that lecture only to get their soundbite and smear me, which they did. But anyway, after that, this wonderful Canadian journalist, Junaid Khan, came up to me and said, "Hey, Eva, I was in Iraq when the US invaded." And, back then he was saying, like, we didn't have, like, internet wasn't a thing there, or a thing in general. And he made a really, like, a lot of effort to get his article back to his Canadian La Presse editor, Agnes Gruda, the woman who wrote the hit piece on me. And he said she demolished it from like a 1,400 word article to like 300-400 words, completely changed the tone from what he had honestly written about Iraqis not welcoming the invasion to the opposite. So
Wow.
like, here's a guy that was actually working with an establishment media, and they, like you said, his words could not get past them. And by the
Right.
way, this woman took issue with the fact that I wear, generally don't have it now, I'm not sure where it is, a bracelet of the sovereign flag of Syria, because I recognize Syria's sovereignty and Syria is very dear to me. But anyway, she took issue with that and said no respectable or credible journalist would ever wear that. So when I went on her Facebook,
Wow.
I found her in Libya holding a terrorist rifle. You know?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jihadi Agnes.
So, you know what really struck me in the interview that you gave with RT is that you just said you're going right back to Donbass. And I'm really, and so here you are, you're live, from Ukraine in this moment. You've just arrived, I assume, a few days ago, because I just saw you a few days ago on RT International. How are you feeling? And what was that first day out like for you?
Yeah, so I arrived, what day is today? Today's Sunday. I arrived late afternoon Friday. So, not much you can do that day. But yesterday I went out with a fellow journalist from RT, Roman Kosarov. He's, by the way, he's an excellent journalist. He's been here for most of the 8 years, and he's really courageous, very empathetic, humane journalist. And I would really encourage people to look up his reports. But we went, I'm just gonna look at my phone so I don't mispronounce the area. Well, I don't want to say the exact area, because if I do, I worry that, repercussions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But we went to an area southwest of Donetsk, and it was, it's hard to estimate on the map. It was between 1 and 3 kilometers from Ukrainian forces. And the reason we went there is that he had heard there were around 50 or 60 elderly people that had no means of survival, that were essentially starving. So he wanted to bring humanitarian aid to them. And so it was, part of the route was quite risky, because we were exposed to potential Ukrainian fire, mortar fire or whatever. And we arrived at a monastery in the area, and there were people taking shelter at that monastery, both people that actually lived at the monastery and people from the local region. And when we arrived, the shelling did start. And so we stayed there. We were there for a couple of hours talking with the people, but also waiting for the shelling to stop so that we could go on and find the elderly people and deliver the humanitarian aid. But in the end, we actually had to leave the aid with the people at the monastery so that they would deliver it later, because basically we learned that there was a Ukrainian drone and they had spotted us. So, it was stupid and foolhardy to try to continue on with that. So, I mean, that was my day yesterday. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but there was that risk. And as you know, like, RT crews have come under fire in recent weeks. Well, not just recently, anytime.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, there was an RT, and then some routers. I think someone got killed on routers. Indy, do you have the photos that Eva posted from yesterday? Great. So I wanted you to. So for the audience, I'm asking our producer to put up the photos that Eva was talking about. How are you feeling as far as like I mean, the spirits of the people that you were talking to? What could you describe a little bit of what they're going through and how they're dealing with it emotionally? And here he's posted up your tweet there so people, the audience, can see.
It's much like I lived for 3 years in Gaza, and the situation there is unimaginable. It's much like people in places like Gaza or Syria or I don't know, Yemen, but I have to imagine it would be the same. Places that have been bombarded for years and years, to the silence of the media. People are just getting by. Everything is normal. People don't flinch when they hear the bombs. I don't flinch when I hear the bombs, but people that live there, like, they're doing the motions of living, but it's that, there's no sugarcoating it. They're existing.
So is there infrastructure still in some of those areas, like for running water, electricity? Obviously, like where you are right now, there's internet or capability of some electricity, but is fresh water and food? You were mentioning they were having trouble getting food. Is that an issue? right
Yeah,
now
it is an
in
issue.
this
It is
moment?
an issue in those areas. I mean, this was right on the front line with the Ukrainian forces. So
Right.
I don't know how. I asked Roman, like, how are these people surviving? He said they're starving. I have to imagine that. I mean, there is goodwill amongst the communities. I have to imagine that other people in the region are helping them. Because I don't know. And you know, in 2019, when I came here and I went to Gorlivka, which is north of here, which I do hope to go back to, and is being pounded.
Right.
I was speaking with a couple of friends yesterday, and I when I went to those areas on the front lines with Ukrainian forces, it was mainly elderly, and I have no idea how they were surviving. And it broke my heart speaking with them, because they, you know, they're like, you can just imagine they're like your grandmother or something. And they had nowhere to go. They could not flee even if they wanted to. And I don't, like, they're existing. I really don't know how they're existing. Here in Donetsk, there's electricity, of course, but there are water cuts. So for like 8 hours, 9 hours a day, the water's off. It's manageable.
Oh, wow.
People just fill up buckets of water or bathtubs if they can, and you know, just wait until the time when the water is flowing again. Actually, the place I was at yesterday, some man asked me if I had a power bank. So I went in my bag and I got the power bank, and then he said, "Can I keep it?" And I'm like, "Okay." You know,
Yeah.
like,
yeah,
they're replaceable. They're replaceable for us, but
Yeah.
in that situation, no. I mean, that could be the whole community is using it. I don't know.
Oh, wow. Well, Eva, you're doing amazing work. And I don't, you know, I'm hesitating to ask you future plans, because again, I want your safety first. And that is the most prominent thing right now. So before I get into the next kind of thing, I wanted to ask you, Indy, is there some comments or questions in the chat that you wanted to highlight for Eva?
Well, everybody is just showing a lot of love. They're saying even normies are catching on. Everything they've been calling Russian propaganda for the last 6 years has turned out to be true. Jenny Lynn says, can you imagine having that kind of audacity, no matter how bad you want that career? Can you imagine gaslighting a real journalist in a war zone? You'd have to be a real sociopath.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank
all
you.
right. We've got Radical Leftist Agenda in the house, and Big Mad Crab, who does all of the thumbnails. And I wanted to give him a shout out and say hi to
He
Big
did the
Mad
artwork.
Crab.
Yeah, Greg. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
For tonight. Again, Gira Brown saying so many sociopaths in government and media in this business. That's a lot of it. Again, this is a really good interview conversation. If Jackson was on live, would you Jackson people be here live? Ha ha ha. Yeah, except we know they would anyway, because we all love Jackson and Tara and everyone, and we're all doing the work here. And of course, okay, Jackson, I wish Jackson would ask Eva to be on, okay? But we'll talk about that another time. And again, how does a journalist stay away from danger in this type of scenario is what Big Mad Crab is asking.
Oh, there you don't. You don't stay away from it. You just, you're aware of the fact that you could be shelled, or, I mean, look, in my time in Gaza, I never wore body armor. I never experienced that until I came to here in 2019. So in Gaza, you know, like, we were under F-16 bombs, we were under drones. I was being fired at by Israeli live ammunition, and you just get used to it. That is the extreme. I've learned. To me, it became normal, unfortunately. Became normal, the fact that you just at any point could be drone bombed or F-16 or shot. But here, I mean, you wear the body armor, and, like, for example, when we were driving to this village yesterday to try to meet the elderly people, Roman's just like, okay, now this stretch of road is exposed to Ukrainian fire, you know, like, you know what to do. He was like, you know, when they start firing, you know, get out of the car, drop to the ground, don't go into the fields because they're mined, you know, that kind of thing. Like, so there's knowledge you kind of like acquire as you go along, like street knowledge, I guess, and things to do or not to do.
I just also want to mention,
it's
sorry, Pascal says here, Eva, thank you so much for your courage and dedication to showing the truth on the front. Lots of respect and admiration. And of course, we want to definitely show respect and admiration what you're doing out there, and to give us the real story and to counter the narrative. Again, I also want to say thank you myself, and I'll turn off the mic so everybody else doesn't have to hear me.
Thank you.
So Eva, I have a question about, you just came, you were previously in Moscow, and I think a lot of Americans are cut off now. They've censored RT, and in England, they pulled their license arbitrarily. And as you know, an RT journalist, Brian McDonald, was sanctioned. So he's Irish, and now that means he can't travel in the EU, and all his assets were seized simply because he worked for RT.
Yeah.
Could you tell me some thoughts about that, and what it's like for day-to-day Russians right now, with all this vitriol coming from the West, from NATO countries, from their governments, not from the common people, but from the governments, the ruling class, and from the West, the American ruling class?
Yeah, it's like, for me, I moved to Russia 1 year ago, and I had visited Russia for a couple of months in 2019. So I'm still quite new to Russia, but for me, as I guess an outsider, it's kind of heartbreaking to be aware of all the vitriol and Russophobia and stereotypes of what Russians are, and then to see how genuinely good people are in Russia. And I just can't wrap my head around how people could actually believe these stereotypes about Russians, because I've had so many positive, of course there's bad people everywhere, but in my experience, I've had so many positive experiences with Russians. Yeah, that part is really heartbreaking. I mean, even, for example, when I came here a couple months ago, my neighbors learned I was coming here, and they did this time. I have a bag right with me. They put together a suitcase of aid to take with me, like basic humanity. And I have another suitcase, and it's full of diapers and child medicine and whatever stuff for kids. And they were their hearts breaking for the people of the Donbass. And to be honest, what I've heard from, of course, this is just from people I've met, their hearts breaking for everybody. They're empathetic with Ukraine. They don't want people, and this is, I'm making this point because we see the vitriol coming from Ukrainian nationalists, people who think Russians are subhumans, or orcs, or all these horrible terms they have for Russians. But I'm not seeing that in Russia. I'm seeing, okay, people want an end to the bloodshed and all that, right, but I've seen a lot of empathy in Russia for people of Ukraine, and I don't mean regarding the way the West is depicting what's happening, but in general, and the fact that they're living in this horrible system and corrupt state, and now facing this operation to eradicate the Nazism that is very real and very vivid there. But back to what you're saying, sorry. So how people are being affected. I mean, they've been dealing with Russophobia for years. On the other hand, I've had people say well, no, I've got friends in the West, and they're saying it's not so bad. They don't hate us. But then I meet other people who say yeah, we don't talk with our friends anymore because they don't want to talk with us. I don't know. But the situation in Russia itself, the food prices have gone up a little bit, but not compared to what I've been hearing from the West.
Right.
And generally it feels pretty normal. I'm sorry, you had some other elements to your question I think I've forgotten.
Oh, no, it's okay. I had talked about the fact that there was an RT journalist who was sanctioned, Brian McDonald, but also other journalists in fact, they're no longer, some of them are not even working for RT any longer, but they have Russian state affiliated underneath their names, their personal Twitter accounts, like George Galloway, Caleb Maupin, I'm trying to think, Rachel Blevins, who she may still be working for it too, but some of them aren't. They're like George is not, he's doing his own thing. And also he had 4 decades of being, as well-known, political figure and so on and so forth. So what is your thought on that, on journalists just being targeted this way?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, when I was mentioning the Canadian state-funded CBC, they don't have Canadian state funded under their Twitter handle, and none of these organizations do, but they should very much should, because actually now I know I write op-eds for RT, which I've done since 2013, but I always RT has allowed me to write what I want and what I think, and as we just discussed earlier, Tara, I could not do that for any Canadian media. I would be censored like crazy, and it's pretty crazy that RT gets, or Russian media, not just RT, but Sputnik and Russian media, get all the heat and get all the labels. But in my opinion, I mean, I don't agree fully with everything any media publishes, but they're more honest than Western media in what's going on here, and yet they're targeted with this label. And then it's absolutely ridiculous that independent or individual journalists within that are affiliated with RT are targeted with the label, especially if they've discontinued their work with RT. But even if they are still working with RT or Sputnik or whatever media, it's absolutely like, what would America do if journalists for the New York Times were targeted? Because
Right.
I mean, my God, that is one of the most ridiculous and absurd conveyors of propaganda in the New York Times, or the BBC, or the Guardian. The Guardian is among the worst. Now imagine all the individual journalists that write for the Guardian in any capacity, food blogger, whatever, are sanctioned. You know, then they would say, like, they would raise the alarm. So it's another example of Western double standards and hypocrisy. Everything they can apply any sort of sanctimonious standard to Syria, to Russia, to any targeted nation, and it's fine for them. But of course, it would be unacceptable. And actually, if we come back to the current situation, Russia, before beginning the military operation, Vladimir Putin spoke of the many reasons for the military operation, one of which was NATO's continued expansion eastward, another of which was tangible intelligence that Ukraine intended to attack full scale the Donbass, which, by the way, if you read the Postal, Jacques Baud, former Swiss intelligence, he also corroborates that. You know, he's not a Russian bot or what have you, he's former Swiss intelligence. And he also corroborates the fact that there was reasonable intelligence that Ukraine intended to attack. But anyway, the point being, in terms of double standards, what would America have done if Russia or any other country was encroaching on America and surrounding America and putting military bases in Mexico or Canada or wherever? You know, it's like it's always this consistent double standards. America's occupying land in Syria. And has destroyed swaths of Syria and is stealing Syrian oil, burning Syrian wheat, and that these hypocrites in suits dare to claim that Russia is causing a famine in Ukraine when Ukraine has mined its own ports, preventing ships from leaving. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm just going on about double standards, but it's endless.
No,
So
I mean, it's good. That's why you're on.
Yeah,
to educate the audience. Yeah, definitely.
When we go back to the topic of independent or individual, journalists, whether they're working with RT or other media being sanctioned, it's ridiculous, because again, were you to apply the same standards to Western prostitutes, there would be outrage.
You know, and I want to take this because I know you mentioned you have to leave in just a few minutes. So while for the remaining time you're here, could you talk a little bit about, you've heard that the US is sending $40 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine that hasn't arrived yet. They've already been given like another 800 million, just I think was released, of weapons last week or the week before. So this will have an impact. Where are we with this conflict? Because you're on the ground, and how do you see it unfolding from your opinion? And I know this is your opinion, so it's you know, I mean, it's fluid and it could change, but what is your thoughts? Are we headed towards, because this is, most of us now that talk about this, that have some education and knowledge about it, realize that this is a NATO American proxy war against Russia, using Ukrainians as basically cannon fodder. So what, are we headed towards a global conflict? Do you see any kind of peaceful diplomatic inroads being made anywhere? Is there anything in sight?
Well, as for peaceful or diplomatic inroads, like as Russia has over the past 8 years, Russia has been consistently pushing for diplomatic talks, for means to end conflict. And like the past 8 years, while Ukraine was relentlessly shelling the Donbass republics, Russia kept saying, let's come to the table, let's adhere to Minsk, the two Minsk Accords, and Ukraine didn't. And none of the parties that co-signed those accords pressured Ukraine to adhere to them. So Ukraine continued to bomb the Donbass, as you mentioned earlier, 14,000 killed. And when I came here in March, I reached out to representatives of the two republics. And at that time in March, it was of the 14,000 killed, I think it was 6,000 in the Donetsk People's Republic and 2,000 roughly in Lugansk People's Republic. So 8,000 amongst the 14. Now it's much more because there's been an intensified Ukrainian shelling campaign, including since I arrived and prior to arriving. So the past 8 years, Russia has insisted on diplomatic efforts, and the West has not agreed, and Ukraine has not agreed. And even now, while it conducts the military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, Russia still wants to come to the table with Ukraine and find a means to a peaceful solution. And Ukraine and its Western puppet string pullers are not allowing that to happen. So that's one thing. As for the weapons, I would recommend people listen to people like Brian Berlitic, who is a former U.S. Marine, I believe, based in Thailand, has an excellent knowledge of all things military and weapons. And I listened to him and to summarize what he would say, and I hope I don't get this wrong, but effectively, like what they're sending to Ukraine, it's a lot of money, but the people that are receiving it aren't getting the adequate training to use it. So, they're putting the soldiers or the recruits or the volunteers, whatever, at risk themselves because they don't know how to use these weapons for the most part. This is what I understand. And at the same time, there's more risk of other people being injured because of misfiring or whatever. There's that. And then for those that do know how to use them, I mean, even last night I was trying to work on some of my footage and I was hearing a lot of bombing just outside the window. And I don't know where it was, but it was coming from the West. So I have to assume it's coming from Ukraine. And day one, when I arrived here on Friday, maybe an hour before I arrived, down the street, like 15 minutes walk down the street, Ukraine had bombed an area, and I could see the damage to the apartment building, and like all over the Donbass. As I mentioned yesterday, Gorlivka, north of here, is being shelled heavily, and even a friend who's very accustomed to the shelling said it was hell yesterday. So the weapons that do reach the Ukrainian forces, it's going to mean that more people in the Donbass are being killed and shelled. And by the way, all these areas they're shelling, they're not military areas. They're completely civilian and residential. So there's no target.
So the Ukrainian military is specifically targeting civilian areas?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. When I was here in April, they were shelling the western area of Donetsk. So that was closer to their line. And I remember I went to a market that had been shelled around noon and 5 people were killed, and there were still bodies laying in the market when I went there. Now they're heavily shelling Donetsk proper. In fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday. He was saying, like, yeah, we were outside 50 meters from where I am now, and the shelling started. They were at some restaurant. So it's like, this is where I am right now, is a civilian residential area, commercial civilian residential. So yeah, it's deliberate. And the other thing I would say is, like, we're seeing a repeat not only of the propaganda that we've heard on Syria over the years, everything demonizing Syria and Russia, but also the strategies that terrorists in Syria employed, which is to occupy civilian infrastructure, be it schools, hospitals, or residential buildings. And, when Mariupol was being liberated, there was a lot of talk from Western media about destruction. But there's no talk about why there was destruction. And that reason was, and now there have been countless testimonies, again, people like Patrick Lancaster, various Russian media that were, Murad Gazdiev of RT, and various journalists that were on the ground taking testimonies. And I've heard it myself from residents and from people in the People's Army here, is that Ukrainian forces occupied these residential buildings. So they would fire from them and fire would be returned to them. But on the other hand, conversely, that's been one of the reasons people are always saying, like, why is the advance so slow? on the one hand, it hasn't been slow because I think over 90% of the Lugansk People's Republic has been restored to stability. But on the other hand, people ask like, well, they're still bombing Donetsk and other cities. Why can't you take them out? And my understanding is they're, well, again, referring to Brian Berlatek, they've had 8 years to deeply entrench themselves and fortify themselves, but also this aspect of them firing from areas where there are civilians. So, the respective forces here, Russian and Donbass forces, are hesitant to return fire all the time because they want to minimize civilian casualties. And this is in stark contrast to how the US operates, to how Israel operates, to how Saudi Arabia operates, in Yemen. In Israel, as we know, just demolishes complete entire neighborhoods.
Just leaves it in rubble.
That's not what we're seeing, how Russia operates. And that's not what we saw in Syria either. And people have to realize that Russia and Syria were, with regards to Syria, we're waging very strategic operations to eradicate the terrorists. And from what I understand, I mean, I'm not seeing it myself because I'm not with the military, but that's how they're operating in Ukraine proper as well. And that's why it's taking time for peace to be restored here. So yeah, the sending $40 billion of aid, it's prolonging the suffering. The way, if the West actually gave a damn about human lives in Ukraine, they would have stopped all this support to Nazis in Ukraine. They would have stopped fanning the flames of war years ago, and they would have encouraged Zelensky or whoever was in power, to meet with Russia and to find, a common ground. But that's not, they don't want that. They want to distract people in the US from, what you're enduring in the US.
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about your healthcare system. Let's talk about your roads. Let's talk about poverty, all the problems that you have in the US. Let's distract you from that by fanning the flames of a war that doesn't need to happen.
Absolutely. And I think, too, Julian Assange gave his freedom to bring forth the war crimes of the West, evidence of that and receipts of that, including the Maidan, coup in 2014. And many Russians, when you ask them, they say this conflict started in 2014 when the Western Baku. I mean, would you agree?
Yep. Absolutely. I remember when I came here in 2019, I went to, again, Gorlivka and the regions, like 500 meters from the Ukrainian forces, being shelled by the Ukrainians. And I asked them, because I did interview some of the people in the military, and I said, why did you take up arms? And most of them were not military before, or maybe, okay, the people I met, I don't want to say of the army because I don't know, but I would say the people I met and spoke with were not military before. They had various different normal careers, but they said, we saw what happened in Kiev. We saw the massacre in Odessa. We did not want that to come to us. We saw the rise of this ultranationalism, this Nazism. And they actually asked me, what do people in Canada think about the fact there are Nazis in Ukraine? And I'm like, they don't know. And they don't know there are Nazis in Canada, or that Chrystia Freeland is the descendant of a Nazi collaborator and she's very proud of him. It's not a matter of Chrystia Freeland, our deputy prime minister, having a skeleton in the closet that she's ashamed of. No, she's proud of her Nazi collaborating grandfather. So anyway, they would ask me that. I'm like, yeah, most people don't know because our media doesn't do that work and tell them. Our media covers it up. And just as they've been covering up the Azov and Aidar and other Nazi battalions saying, oh, well, yeah, they don't exist anymore. It's completely disgusting, Tara. Again, because with all this, we get the incessant virtue signaling, the pretend concern for people in this region.
Yeah, the blue and yellow flags, you mean on the social media?
Yeah, and just like the script reading, corporate media prostitutes, they're so concerned about people in Ukraine, but if they were so concerned, they'd be talking about the Nazis and the fact that Ukrainian civilians can be disappeared for not even having dissenting views, maybe appearing to have dissenting views or speaking Russian.
Or you said, giving a taxi ride. Right.
Yeah. What if you're in Canada and just because you spoke French, that's like a crime against the state and you're disappeared and you're executed. That's what we're talking about.
Oh my
that's
God.
How crazy it is.
Yeah. I don't think Westerners are really getting what they're supporting. I really just don't. I think they're starting to wake up. I've noticed there's less yellow and blue flags. I'm not sure if that's just the American and Western general, attention deficit, or just, not being able to hold the attention that long, or if it's actually because they're seeing there's been enough out there where, you've have these pictures of Azov battalion Nazi symbols, and it's kind of made its way into some of the mainstream. So the answer to that was they now were trying to do what they call, try to erase the symbols and whatnot and hide them when they're doing the photographs. So that's just dishonest, but it's not going to change the ideology that those people are following.
It's like when Al Qaeda in Syria rebranded,
There you go.
Yeah, they're no longer Al Qaeda in Syria, but they have the same ideology that hasn't changed. So
yeah. Exactly. So for just on your way out, I know you have to get on the road and do your work, and I have just great admiration. And I know many that are listening and watching are with you in spirit and surrounding you with, safety and thoughts of being able to do your good work. And I'm not trying to just say you are very, very brave to do what you're doing. Just the way you casually said, yeah, there was bombing outside. I was like, God, like, I don't, I'm sitting in my little, Northwestern place where, you might hear a neighbor with a gun, but like, you don't hear bombs and things. Right. So you're in the heart of it. You're doing good work, and you're trying to raise awareness, and we are all grateful. And Indy, do you have any final questions or comments from the audience for Eva? Before we
let's see. Consider becoming. Oh, love your courageous work, Eva. Thank you. Stay safe and give your doggies a hug and pet for me. Of course, that's.
Oh my God, I miss them.
Dingo ate me, baby. Okay. Well, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin are making a fortune on this proxy war. Of course, Ghost is saying that. Yeah. He's had a lot of fantastic say. Well, I say they've had fantastic stuff to say. And of course, facetiously, thank God the Democrats are protecting us from Russian Facebook ads. It's turned out really great. Thumbs up. That's pretty funny.
So Eva, how can our audience find you and support your work? Like, what are some important things? What are ways that they can help you and with all the important work you're doing?
Oh, well, thank you for asking that. I have my Telegram channel, Reality Theories, Eva K. Bartlett. I'm active on social media, but we don't know how long we'll all be on Twitter or any of the other stuff.
We do not know.
Yeah. And I have my blog in Gaza.wordpress.com, and there's a PayPal there, but again, PayPal is a limited thing as well, so I need to change that. So, but yeah, just sharing and maybe fighting against the whole Russian propaganda thing, that in itself, like aside from any sort of financial support, just fighting the propaganda is like, it would be a really huge thing. Yeah. And then the Brandy, the NBC hack, she got demolished on Twitter because of people like your listeners, like people got on Twitter, and there's no way. I mean, she could, in her delusional world, say, yeah, these are all Eva Bartlett's paid stooges. But, these are normal people that were pissed off, critical thinkers that were pissed off, and totally demolished her and showed her to be the corporate owned shill that she is. So that kind of thing, I love seeing that. So yeah, that's what people can do, is just more of that stuff, like just showing that, you can't possibly paint the entire internet as Russian stooges. You can try, but
no,
just look like it.
They can't keep silencing all of us that are trying to, speak the truth. And, we have your link tree in our, I believe it's in the YouTube and whatever. So people have ways to, and what I would encourage is people get on the social media and follow Eva's work, follow her. She's doing real-time work, and videos will be posting soon of her most recent things. And we'll try to raise it up as much as we can. And also please like and subscribe this YouTube channel and support Independent News Network as well. And thank you to Indy for helping us late this evening on East Coast time and early in the morning York time, Eva. So Eva, I just again want to reiterate, I think I want to be you when I grow up. You're just amazing. And except that you're younger than me. But thank you for all the work that you do, and just just know that you have people around you that care and that are that want to know what's really happening and not have it filtered through a Western lens. So there you have it. There you have it. So thank you.
That's very kind of you. I appreciate that.
All right. Be safe. Godspeed. Okay. Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Mhm.